Good morning, friends. Hello, hello. How are you this morning? Pray you're doing great. Got the travel mug out this morning. The highly desired, never reproduced little First Congregational Church travel mug. They are a collectible. So, good morning, friends. Tasty caffeine goodness. Hope that you are out enjoying this spring day. It is truly, in all the different ways, feels like spring this morning. There's a little breeze up. There's a little sun out. Things are warming, but not too warm, that's for sure. There's all manner of goodness. So I hope you are finding some joy in it and some goodness in it as well. Good morning, friends. How are you? Doing great. Tomorrow night, we will begin with our Illuminating Fall River project that we've been a part of. I hope maybe you'll come out down at the South Coast Chamber of Commerce, where we'll have a little party, a little shindig at 8 o'clock tomorrow night, and dedicate the illumination of the We Hear memorial, or We Hear artwork on the Potter's Printing Building. It is a beautiful piece of artwork by Ad Fuel, a famous artist, and we have managed to secure lighting for it. And so we are going to celebrate the illumination of that and the return to light downtown in our fair city. That's part of our little work that we've got going on here, and would love to have you come down and celebrate with us. All right, let's get going this morning. It is the 7th day of May on this Thursday at 11:11, and today is what is known as the National Day of Prayer. Now, there have been many different national days of prayer through the course of the history of the United States and its journey. We today are actually celebrating the 75th consecutive one, if you want to put it that way. Harry Truman, back in the 50s, had one of the first in our modern era, post-World War II era, days of prayer. And there has been a continuous day of prayer, not always the same day, but always a day of prayer set aside by the nation for the past 75 years. And so it is a well-worn tradition within the nation and within the governmental structures of the nation. And I wanted to lift it up today just because, some of you might say, well, they need it, or they really need some prayer there, like that Washington, D.C. Or you may see it as kind of a problematic thing if you do, of the fact that perhaps the very institutions that are in the business of administering taxes and doling out and have a monopoly on violence and all the things that we talk about the state having, they should also be the ones to beseech us to pray. But however you come at it, like whatever you do with it, I want us to lift up this. I just want to take a moment and consider this notion of what it means to come together in prayer and the gathering in prayer and the invitation to do so for the nation, if you will. Now here's the thing. This is an ancient practice, long before there were nations. The thing is we pray for the nations, and the Bible even talks about this. Even way before there were nations, it talks about the prayer for the nations. And the nations were not like Bulgaria or France or Botswana, the nation, now we have these nation state things where we have these borders, but when they spoke of the nations, when the Bible speaks of nations, it speaks of all peoples, the peoples from all around the world, not that we're boundaried by geography, but that were assembled by particular cultures and particular ways of being. And the kind of our first encounter with this is really in the Bible, where it talks about this kind of God's sovereignty over the nations, where he says that we see in the 22nd Psalm, for dominion belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. So then, and that's again not, there was no Finland back then. Like, it's not like they were considering that. It is that all peoples everywhere God has reign over, and that the invitation is to then, from our little associative group, our little filial group, our little group that we journey with and we love together, that we might beseech God to intercede and be with us on our behalf. It began at the very beginning of the American experience. I mean, this is the thing, we're today is a celebration of the 75th consecutive day of prayer since Harry Truman instituted the day of prayer. But this is really a much deeper and longer thing, even with the idea of our nation. That there are plenty of examples. Our Thanksgiving being the most obvious of them. That in 1621, after when the Pilgrims gathered and gave thanksgiving, that was a day of prayer. That Thanksgiving wasn't just having a big meal and watching some football. It was actually beseeching God in prayer and fasting. And again this would happen. Edward Winslow when the harvest started to dry up, and he would institute a day of prayer and fasting among the Pilgrims. He wrote. Drought and the like considerations moved not only every good man privately to enter into an examination with his own estate between God and his conscience, and so to humiliation before him, but also to humble ourselves together before the Lord by fasting and prayer. You'll see all kinds of glossy and glitzy things today if you go look up the National Day of Prayer and all the things that are going on around it. There'll be all kinds of amazing things. But I think coming back to Winslow's words, Winslow, one of the first of the Pilgrims, one of the first of our tradition to set foot on American shores, and one of the first leaders to found our very way of being in this on this continent and in this world, as a way of humbling ourselves together before the Lord by fasting and prayer. We come to worship and we pray together. We'll say the Lord's Prayer together. We'll offer prayer intentions together. We'll lift up our sorrows together. But this notion, and that's a powerful and beautiful thing. But this notion that we might set aside a day to pray for the nation. We might set aside a day to pray for one another, to pray for our cultures together. There's no more powerful kind of invitation to this than Paul. When Paul comes along and he's giving kind of instructions. So he has Timothy, his young Padawan, his little learner, and he's trying to give Timothy some advice on how to lead these churches, and how to be a spiritual leader among them, and what to invite them into, as Paul is kind of understanding he's not much longer for the world. And so he writes a couple of letters to Timothy. And so in this first letter, right at the beginning of it, he writes this. This is 1 Timothy 2. First of all, then, I urge you that petitions and prayers and intercessions and thanksgivings be offered for everyone, for kings and all those in authority, so that we may lead tranquil and quiet lives in all godliness and dignity. Now, this is one of the fun things about that. When he says pray for kings and all those in authority, he's talking about the likes of Nero and the likes of Caligula. Those are the guys he's talking about that should be prayed for. That whole structure, that whole corrupt and meat grinder of a structure that is and was the Roman Empire, the way that the Romans, as the famous historian said, the Romans would create a desert and call it peace, that they would just go in and kill everybody and say they brought the Pax Romana, and that was the Pax Romana. And that is what Paul invites Timothy to lead his early churches into. Not so that, they might be successful in the meat grinder, but that they might be successful in bringing about godliness and dignity and tranquil and quiet lives for the church and for the folks within the empire that the church exists. And as we stand today on the 75th and on the 75th National Day of Prayer, instituted by good old Harry Truman, Mr. Buck stops here. It brings us back to Winslow, and it brings us back to Paul, and it brings us back to, George Washington, when Washington stood in prayer in the cold of Valley Forge and asked already starving and already embattled soldiers trying to get through the winter to fast and pray with him for their survival and success. That the list is entirely too long, but of leaders in this nation continuing to invite the nation into prayer and into fasting. And all of this is that, and one, you can be really cynical about this. This is the reason I want to talk about it today, because there is a cynicism that is deep within us and deep within our being, that, they want to pray just to bamboozle us, or just to quiet us, just to use that old Marx tune of like, the religion is opiate of the masses, and so let's just quiet everybody down and make them feel like they're doing something. Or there are some really cynical ways in which I have heard and continue to hear these notions of praying for our nation and praying for our collective wellness together, and they hurt my heart. They hurt my heart. Because this was from our pilgrim ancestors on, from our spiritual ancestors back to Paul, from our spiritual ancestors back to Ezra, like back to the early prophets of the Old Testament, back thousands of years, that our collective life together matters, and our collective life together has power and purpose in it. And we might think it, we may disagree with it. We may not like the way that it's played out. We may not like the people who are a part of it. None of that is what it matters in our call to humble ourselves together before the Lord by fasting and prayer. The more corrupt we think it is, like Paul in the midst of Caligula, the more corrupt we think it is, the more we should beseech our collective life together in prayer, not less. And friends, and so I want to invite you today to celebrate the National Day of Prayer. I will. I'm going to offer some prayers. I'm going to offer some prayers for the nation and for our life together. And I hope you will too. I hope that I don't know what all the shiny and glitzy things that are going on in this sense, but that we might, like Edward Winslow pointed out in those hard early times of the Pilgrims. He says, that drought and like considerations moved not every good man privately to enter into examination of his own estate between God and his conscience. Privately we can pray. That's great. Privately we can do these things. But so to humiliation before him, but also to humble ourselves together before the Lord by fasting and prayer. Friends, there's nothing more we need. You and I and all the people we encounter, all the people that you meet when you're walking down the street, the people that you meet each day, is to humble ourselves together before the Lord in fasting and prayer. So I hope that you'll take some time, not just privately to do so, but maybe maybe throw a prayer on your socials. Maybe invite others to do so. Maybe in some way be a part, declare to each other this 75th anniversary of the nation having a day set aside to gather in prayer. And let not your bitterness and let not your jadedness and let not your worry overcome the call to this day, the prayers for peace and prosperity, the prayer for our leaders, the prayer for nations of justice and righteousness, the prayer for God's sovereignty over all the nations, including and especially our own, that we may live and lead tranquil lives, quiet lives in godliness and dignity. Peace and grace to you, my friends. I hope you are well. I hope you'll make it out for our illumination event coming up on tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Great to see you there. We'll be worshiping on Sunday at 10 o'clock. Hope you'll join us live 282 Rock Street or here in the digital space. Either way, we will pick it up next week with another 11:11.